Good evening, everyone. My name is Mariah Maskins. I'm a professor here at the University of San Diego in the business school. I teach classes in strategy and entrepreneurship, and I'm very excited to be moderating this panel on what I would say to my 21-year-old self. So what we're going to be doing over the next 45 minutes is I'm going to have each of the panelists introduce themselves briefly, tell us a little bit about their background, and then after everyone's done that, we'll have the panelists talk a little bit about what they would say to their 21-year-old self. Probably have one more question, and then we'll turn it over to the audience to ask your questions. All right. So with that, we will get started. And if you could each just briefly introduce yourselves, say a little bit about your entrepreneurship background.
Sure. So I'm Victoria Lakers. I just entrepreneur background, or
whatever you think is
I guess we can
relevant.
dive into the rest of it later. Was in event sales and then went into private equity and hedge funds. And James was talking about 2008. So I went into private equity actually 2 months before Lehman, and I was busy job hunting with no background in private equity. So still going into a company, but kind of entrepreneurial because it was a career change and figuring out how to get into one of the largest private equity firms in the country with no experience. So kind of proud of that. And the answer is networking, which we can talk about later. But I moved here about 4.5 years ago, started a signage and graphics company, which I sold a few years ago. Also bought and sold an e-commerce company, and now work with a number of different companies in a outsourced CFO type role.
Hi, everyone. I'm Sarah. I graduated from USD Business School in 2012, so I'm excited to be back. I've always worked in a very entrepreneurial environment. My first job I started while I was a junior at USD, and that was a small mortgage company, and I helped grow that. During my time there, I was fortunate to come into a leadership role and become an executive of the company. And I just realized the shortage for women leadership development resources and communities, especially here in San Diego, and especially for women in male-dominated fields. So I started the Gritty Movement, which is a leadership development firm. We focus specifically on women-run businesses, and we throw an annual leadership conference, which we threw our first one in May, and we had about 250 women there, entrepreneurs, women in management, so that was super exciting. And now I'm currently the VP of Business Development for a tech company called Vita Loop, and we specialize in civic engagement technology.
Hi, my name is Ramon Toledo. I'm originally from Tijuana, Mexico. Originally, I was a stockbroker, a diplomat, real estate developer, and then late in my 38, when I was 38, I decided to create the first startup in Baja California, one of the first ones in Mexico. Went through all the hassles that one can see as a startup company. Now it's one of the most successful ones. We do levelup.com, we do Rotten Tomatoes in Spanish, San Diego Union Tribune, Core, Metatube, a lot of other sites, but we've gone through all, I mean, people say, well, only 99% of startups, they fail. Well, in Mexico, 99.9% fail because, yeah. So it's very difficult, but I've gone through everything that can happen. It's interesting. I still go to Tijuana every day. We have an office here in Mexico City, and yep, it's very interesting, and I'm gonna be happy to talk to you about it later on.
Hey everyone, my name is Chris Cesare. I went to school here, graduated in 2016 from the School of Engineering. My co-founder and I, Scott Matthews, who's in the back here, while we were juniors, actually in Mariah's entrepreneurship classes where our idea was formed, we came up with the idea for a camera accessory for cameras, or for small cameras, so think your iPhone, GoPro, other cameras in that realm. And as we progressed through school, we continued to develop our idea. And once we graduated, we decided to take it on full time. And we launched a crowdfunding campaign last year that was very successful. And since then have gone to launch our e-commerce website. And so right now our product Trek, which is a camera slider for GoPros and iPhones, is available for sale. And we're working on our next product line and continuing to generate sales through different channels, our e-commerce, and working into getting the distributors. So yeah, that's Jeff.
And by the way, his product is really cool. I saw them a couple of years ago at GSEA. My name is JD Davids, and I've been on the management teams of 8 different companies that were backed by venture capitalists. 6 of them had successful exits, either half of them were IPO, half of them were strategic acquisitions. I've had the privilege of closing over $1 billion in transactions, including angel investment, venture capital, IPOs, M&A. Started my career actually in the United States Marine Corps for 4 years, where I got some great experience there. Hoorah. And now I currently run Smart Money Startups, which is a program with the goal of attacking the 85% failure rate for startups, because I think it's ridiculous and unacceptable. And our goal is to help 10,000 entrepreneurs over the next 10 years. We do that with a combination of long-term continuing education and group coaching programs and education. We also have small groups that are peer-to-peer groups. And so I look forward to meeting each of you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Michelle Moore, and I graduated from USD School of Business in 1985. And when I graduated, I went into a very traditional job role at KPMG. And my husband, and my husband did a doctorate degree at the University of Arizona, and it was in optical sciences. And he, while in school, started a software program that really was just for his own use and for some students, friends' use. And it was to design lenses that ultimately were used in the design of smartphones and some very large telescopes and many medical instruments that you'd be familiar with. And so, but because he worked at Lawrence Livermore, I was with KPMG, we never really had any role models that were entrepreneurs. So it was very challenging for us and people thought we were kind of crazy, time to leave these really good careers. But we took the chance and we did it. And so 25 years later, we sold the company to a private equity firm, and which would, and we can talk about later, but exiting the company, it's been a very big transition for both of us. And so I'm doing something very low tech and completely different. I'm a flower farmer in Maui, and so it's working in the soil. It's very different from sitting behind a computer, but it's been good. It's been a good change for me.
Are you hiring?
Yes, we all want to be flower farmers in Maui, right? All right, so it looks like we have a broad range of businesses and experiences and backgrounds. I'm excited to learn more. So I thought we could just start off with the prompt for this particular panel. What would you say to your 21-year-old self? So we could start the other direction this time if you want.
Well, I think it's kind of surprising, but I think we were much bigger risk takers actually when we were younger, and I'm not sure as we evolved, I think we got into our industry by kind of going in as the lower price point, and we were always very concerned about conservative about raising prices, figuring that might create an opening for competition. So I think we should have been more aggressive at valuing our product more and maybe building out our company's infrastructure more. My husband was careful about releasing access to the source code, and that was probably something that we should have considered doing earlier on, because we ended up selling the company, but it wasn't something that it was kind of unexpected. It was in 2011, and we weren't really actively looking to sell the company. But I think that really did hurt the valuation, that we weren't more risk takers, but we weren't building infrastructure, we weren't raising prices, we weren't making it so he wasn't the single point failure. So I think I would have, if I could have told myself something, it would have been just to stay, ready and open to take risks. So we kind of went the other way. We went, from being risk takers to being more conservative as we went on.
So if I was able to talk to my 21-year-old self, it'd be very similar to a conversation I've been having with my nephew for the last 5 years, who's 26. And it's a real pleasure. But the two main things that I would tell my younger self is, number one, know yourself. Not your degree, not your jobs, not those things, but what do you naturally do really, really well? Because if you know that, that can be your North Star, and everything else can just sort of fill in. I honestly didn't realize what my greatest gifts were until about 4 years ago when I did the Clifton Strengths Finder, at which point I thought I was a deal guy for the last 25 years and over $1 billion in deals. So that's true. But what I realized is that I'm a natural journalist, researcher, teacher. And I've never made less money in my life, but I've never had more rewarding experiences. So knowing yourself from the beginning counts for a lot. The second thing I would say is do not network. Build relationships. There is a big difference. Networking. So I was a Marine, and I recently created at the request of UCSD and some other partners as well, a military transition program for people coming out of the military. Hoorah, right? Marine in the room. And when you say networking to people in the military who've been told to keep their mouth shut and their butts down so they don't get shot, they like, no, I'm like networking. No, that's like used car salesman stuff. And I'm like, if that's what you think networking is, don't do it. But I would say some of the best business deals I've ever done, some of the best hires I've ever made, some of the best customers I've ever had are people that I knew beforehand and I paid it forward. I encourage people to build relationships by getting involved in community groups, volunteering for events like this. Get to know other people, because the one thing that I've seen a lot of entrepreneurs make a mistake on, and then I'll hand it off, is the mad scientist, better mousetrap idea, where I'm just going to sit in the lab for 2 years and figure out the best product in the world, and then I'm going to be rich. Don't do that. Ask for help.
So what would I tell my 21-year-old self? Yeah, so I briefly mentioned this when I was introducing myself, but when I was 21, I was actually in Mariah's entrepreneurship class. And that is when Scott and I developed our first pitch deck. And it's pretty funny if you look back at it nowadays, it's comical.
It was good. I thought it was good.
But one of the things I would say is that I would probably just say slow down, because when we were developing this, there's so many times where we set goals for ourselves, and it's good to set goals, and you need to set goals to keep you on track. But the amount of times, we had always planned on going with this crowdfunding route, and the amount of times we set a future date for our crowdfunding campaign start and moved it back was, beyond counting. So, and then it felt like we were kind of at this race, being juniors in college with an entrepreneurial idea. It felt like we were in this race against the clock. Get something started before we graduated college, and then that way we could graduate and have an income and start getting money. But get off the rice and bean diet. But it definitely got us pushing a lot, and that was good because that got a lot of things done. But then when you set these goals, you end up setting yourself up for missing some of them, and sometimes that gets you down. So after we graduated, one of the big things was, how are we going to afford to continue doing this? We got to, start getting sales, and then, investment comes along, and then that sets us up for, gives us more time to develop our product and get ready for launch. And, but yeah, every time you set a goal, especially what we've learned with physical product development, is that there is just everything happens all the time. Whether you're dealing with supply chain issues, manufacturers, production delays, Chinese New Year, everything. Everything takes longer than you think. And going into it, one thing I would definitely tell myself is not to stress out about it, because it's just how it works.
Well, I think I would tell first of all, 21 years, I would say, let's start tomorrow, because I started when I was 38, my startup. That was having kids, family. It's a lot. It takes a lot. I mean, it's 18 hours a day. And I used to answer I love airports, because that's where I could answer a lot of my emails, because and it's just, living in hotels, things like that. So you have to have more energy and be younger. It does take its toll. I've been doing it for 11 years. And now sometimes I just wake up and I see 600 emails. I go, okay, I'll do this on Saturday and Sunday. And it's hard. I wake up 5 in the morning, to do this, but I love it. I actually do love it. I mean, I was I was a stockbroker, diplomat, real estate developer, all these things, but I always worked for somebody else. This was my dream. This was something I wanted to do. Another thing is don't take no. I mean, imagine a Tijuana startup in 2006 after the whole crash raising money. You know how many people told me this is true? I went to a program with the Mexican government. They sent us to Silicon Valley, and we did the road show and asked for money. People told me, "Do you guys have computers in Mexico?" They actually told me that, and I'm like, "Yes, of course we do. We have all these." Well, I didn't take no. I did it again and again and again until I raised my first money. My first round. Second thing, bootstrap. Really, I mean, we're stupid because we have this money, we get all excited, and we want the big office in La Jolla, big office in Mexico City. And I went and hired the VP of MSN, which was Microsoft Mexico. I put him in La Jolla. He had a great office. I even paid his rent. I paid a headhunter, everything else. And what happened is that it's very different to sell your startup than to sell MSN Hotmail or MSN Messenger or MSN.com. It's not the same. We believe, oh, tomorrow I'm going to have instant traffic. Tomorrow I'm going to sell $100 million. Doesn't work like that. So before you know it, you're out of money. And then you have attorneys that would love to steal your money. So it's bootstrap as well. Just be, and the patience and persistence. That's my part.
I have two also. Two things I would tell my 21-year-old self. The first one is not to underestimate any opportunity that you have. So whether it's what you're doing in your classes or presentations or even a part-time job, you never really know what kind of opportunities it's going to turn into. So always put your best foot forward. And I learned that personally when I took my part-time job at that mortgage company when I was a junior. It was something that I took to save money to go to Cabo for spring break with my friends during, my senior year. It wasn't something that I thought I was going to make a career out of, but because I worked hard and I realized the opportunity, I didn't take it for granted. Eventually, I became the COO of that company, and that's how I got involved in leadership to begin with and found my passion that way. So that's definitely the first one. And then the second one was a personal learning lesson for me that I feel like I'm still learning is to have an iterative type of mindset. For me, I've always been very type A and like to have a steady path with everything. And especially if you want to be an entrepreneur, things just don't necessarily pan out that way. And it's important to not look at those different change points or pivots as failures, but more so, okay, I'm just iterating along the way, or I learned something new and I'm going to apply that into my business. So instead of looking at those as failures, definitely look at it as an overall design process of the end goal of what you're trying to accomplish.
So JD covered a bunch of, or two of them, just reiterating the relationship concept. And I like the way you put it. I was like, no networking, but yeah, networking and handing out your card to as many people is not the way to go. And I think also to look at your career and entrepreneurial journey as the acquisition of skills, because I think that in that way, the failures become less difficult because you understand what you've learned, and to go at it and say, what is it that I need to learn to get to this next phase, and then be strategic about it. Okay, I figure I need to learn digital marketing if I'm going to create an e-commerce site, for example. How do I learn that? Who do I know that's the best in the world at it? Is there someone I can reach? Is there some way I can reach them? Is there someone that's maybe not the best in the world at it, but still knows way more than me? And a lot of that can be cold outreach or, hey, let me know who you know. I mean, that's how I got into private equity in 2008. I had everybody introduce me to everybody they knew in private equity, and ended up getting hired after an informational interview. I think it's the same way, whatever you're doing, whether it's building a company or finding a job, is being very specific about that, and thinking of the connections and utilizing those.
Thank you for all those lessons learned. Sort of follow up on that. Could you maybe go into a little bit of detail about maybe your best and worst moment in your entrepreneurial career? This will probably be my last question, and then I'll open it up to the audience. So your best and worst moments. We can start here, where whoever wants to start.
Little struggling on the best moment, but I think there's a big connection between your personal life and your business life. And I happened to have my husband break up with me 5 days before we opened our store. And I say break up with me because took us quite some time to actually finalize the divorce. But I think it's just making sure that you have both in alignment, and starting a company is a struggle. So coming up with that supportive group of people to get you through all of that kind of stuff as well. Happy moments, not necessarily in my entrepreneurial community, but when I was in my event planning days, one of the events we planned was the Carlisle annual meeting. And so it was very cool. We had all the heads of countries. We couldn't actually say it was Carlisle because it was very secret. But I was in the room with all these heads of countries and never thought that I would get into the private equity space. And a few years later when I was actually had a seat at the table at our annual dinner, and it kind of hit me that like, this is pretty cool. Before I was just part of the help, I guess. And so that I was able to be part of that group, and sort of one of them was kind of a cool round circle.
Thank you.
I would say that for every high moment, for every win you have, there's a bunch of lows surrounding that before and after. That's kind of how you get to a high point. One of my recent high points, I would say, is the day of the Gritty Leadership Conference. It was my first conference that I'd ever thrown. And for a while, I don't know if it's just how event sales happen in San Diego, but I was stressed that no one was going to come. And it turned out to be a sellout event, and it turned out to be great. And we got so much good feedback. So I would say that that's definitely a high. I would say a recent low in memory was the day after. It's so weird. Everybody was like, wow, you must feel so proud and so excited. And literally all I could think of is, what am I going to do next? And it was kind of deer in the headlights feeling for me that took a couple weeks even to shake it off. So I would say that's one thing that you definitely don't see on social media after all the highs, is kind of that feeling in the planning process of what is going to be your next challenge and how you're going to accomplish that.
Well, mine probably would be going back to my ex-CEO that I hired from Microsoft. So I went and raised money, and I gave him $250,000 because he's Microsoft, right, and VP of Mexico, and it wasn't working out. Why? Because there's two things, and I always say, entrepreneurs, we like the Red Sea. I don't understand why, but we like Red Sea projects. So my first project was Busca Todo, search all. In my head, I was going to go against Google, and I was going to win. That was my thing, and I was going to bring this $250,000 CEO, and he's going. So guess what? Didn't happen. We ran out of money, and then he comes one day and says, "Listen, you know what? I'm gonna. You've been late twice for your for my salary, and my clause here says that I can sue you." I go, "You do understand we have no money, and part of that is because of you. So, well, I don't care. I'm going to sue you and do this and this and that." And so I had to let him go. Whatever money that we had, we gave to him. I couldn't raise any more money. It was 2008, and the market was right up. And how do you tell your investors, which in that time was friends and family, because that's the first ones you get, that the whole thing's going to shut down? I felt really bad. I felt like I couldn't believe, but this was my dream. This was supposed. I'm positive, and you know, I read all the books, I did all the courses, and it's not happening. And then he just goes and leaves us with no money. And whatever money I had left, I said, well, I have to do something with it. Well, you know, I went and raised a little bit more money. I begged people to give us money, and that comes with the best moment in the part. And then we bought this little video game site called Level Up. So Level Up was a small video game site in Mexico that in esports, owned by two guys. I said, I have no money. I'll give you shares. So I did the whole pitch of how we're going to do a lot of millions of dollars. You're going to get equity. It's better than equity, anything else. I have no money. And then I went and I have no more developers. Everybody left because you're the CTO, the first guy to leave. They have no loyalty. And then I said, well, I'm going to, so I did it with the university. So there was a program that you could bring university insurance and they could develop for you. And we developed the site, the levelup.com site. In 2009, I get an email saying you have been nominated for best website in Latin America. I go, really? Us? And so I arrived at the table, and it was the big media companies, Televisa, TV Azteca, Expansión. And then he says, who are you? Mon Toledo? Where are you from? Tijuana. What are you doing here? They actually told me that. And I said, well, you know, we have a little video game site, and actually we won. We won, and then I came back, and then I told the investors, and I was able to raise more capital. And that was and now I look at it, Red Sea, Blue Sea. I mean, how could I compete against Google? But in Latin America, there were no video game sites. So by pivoting without me knowing, it changed the whole structure of our company.
Yeah, so as you guys know, there's a lot of highs and lows any startup goes through. I'll start off with the low. Developing a physical product is really hard, and there's definitely a lot of lows that come along with it. I briefly mentioned this before, but supply chain can be an absolute nightmare. And one of the big lows that I distinctly remember was when you are dealing with overseas suppliers, especially, you set all these dates in your calendar because, things take a long time and you're dealing with lead times and people can be a pain. But, it'll be like, okay, you're getting, this shipment of this item in March and it'll be in January or something. So this is a batch of production motors that we had been waiting for a couple months now. And Chinese New Year was a big factor. China pretty much shuts down for a month. And then once they finally came in, we were so excited and we ran up to go check them out and we started putting them in our product, and we found out that none of them worked as they should have. So that set us back quite a bit. Something that you'd waited months for, and to have to start over from square one again is pretty rough. And a lot of that happens with a lot of things though, but you just got to take it and run with it. And it ends up working out. But on the flip side, there's lots of highs. Right off the bat, getting investment was a huge high moment for us. That was awesome. But I'd say the one that takes the cake over any other high moment that we've had was after we were going through the product development and prototyping, and we finally got our first production style prototype ready to go. Our next step was to film our launch video. For any crowdfunding campaign, you normally have a little video telling your story. And we got a group of friends together and we went up to Yosemite for the weekend, and we had this really awesome weekend where we were everyone was having fun, and finally this, realization of a couple of years of hard work. And we were out there filming with this product that 3 years ago was just kind of a dream and an idea, and we had it in our hands and it was cooler and better than we had ever imagined. So that was definitely one of the coolest moments that I think we've had so far.
I like that, Chris. When you can actually show somebody instead of describe it is definitely a high moment. So for me, when you first asked the question, what's the highest moment? Certainly $1 billion IPO for organic online was one of them, but it really is not the one that had the greatest impact on me. It's when I left and then started my own company, and I taught myself how to build the prototype. And I'm not a software programmer, but I pretended to be one. And I got a prototype together, got a couple of customers, and I got a little tiny bit of friends and family money. But I'll never forget exactly where I was, because as you know, when you're trying to raise money for something that isn't actually, revenuing yet, it's a real roller coaster. And you literally have days where you're depressed and you're just like, oh my gosh, like I should just get a job, which is like an entrepreneur's worst nightmare. It's like, oh my God, I'd rather be homeless. But I'll never forget, I was talking to an attorney in Silicon Valley, and I'd been talking with her about it. And, a buddy of mine was like, dude, you just got to ask her for the $10,000 investment. So this is like my first actual outside investment person. And she said, yeah, I can do that. And I hung up the phone and I'm literally running around the living room. That was the most exciting, because it's validation, because some days you're like, oh, this is awesome and we're going to be truly successful. And there's other days where like, oh my God, I'm such a dreamer and it's no good. But when you get that validation, it's really a big deal. And to me, that was more than a whole bunch of zeros at the end of the check. The low point, unfortunately, was for the same company. I created one of the first online deal rooms for doing transactions, mergers and acquisitions, IPOs, venture capital deals, because that had been my world, living in these rooms with boxes and boxes of due diligence documents. And every single, you got 2 law firms, and one's in New York and one's in LA, and they want copies of all 15 boxes of documents, right? So anyway, we built a piece of software that had the diligence, the deal calendar, the contact information, all that kind of stuff. And so we raised almost $3 million of outside capital. We literally processed over $1 billion of deals for MGM, Mirage, Shell Oil. We did WebSense's IPO here in San Diego, whole bunch of companies. It was fantastic. And we were in the deal business and we were off to the races, and then 9/11 happened. We were in the deal business. When 9/11 happened, every deal, no matter what, was automatically put on freeze, on hold indefinitely, because the world just changed and we don't know what it means. And so that unfortunately led to the shutdown of that company, but there is a silver lining to that. Instead of just ramming the Ferrari into the wall and spending through all the money, like most people did, we actually returned money to shareholders. When we had the board meeting and finally decided to shut down the company, which, and you got to go tell your friends and your family and the lawyer to give you the 10,000 that we lost all their money. It was extremely humbling, but I mean, of course, it was pennies on the dollar, but it was symbolic that we respected them enough to actually give money back. And so I guess it was the worst moment, but it was certainly a good learning lesson.
Well, I have to agree with what you had said earlier about a high and a low can come very close to each other. And for us, it came at the end. And I mean, of course, it was very exciting to go through the sale process of the company because for my husband, for him, it meant that he planned to stay on without being an owner, partial owner then. We didn't sell the entire company. We took back 10%. And for him, it meant that he could just focus on programming and not have to do anything else. And that's what he thought. And for me, it was great because I thought, great, I can think about what I want to do next. But the low point came, well, for me, the next day, well, I haven't had time to think about what to do next. I mean, literally, you are so busy day in, day out, year in, year out with the company, with raising children if you've got a family. Never really thought about what was going to be next because we really never thought we were going to sell the company. We did enjoy running it. So, and for him, the low point came soon after that too, because he was programming, but it was very different. It was a very different position being now not in control, and where he was on the schedule he wanted to be on as far as development cycles, new products, and that was all under our control. And now we were being told by a private equity firm what the revenue expectations were, and it literally almost killed him. And literally, and so because he always wanted to try to attain that, but they made him very ill, and he's still involved, but he had to make it very, very clear that the only way he'd stay on is to have a role where he only was developing and not having to attain those goals. So it was very much a high and a low, and at that very end.
Thank you all for sharing those high and low moments. I'd like to open it up to the rest of the audience. We have some time for questions. So you had your hand up first.
Wonderful. Thanks so much for sharing. Those are great, incredible insights from all of you. As entrepreneurs, you have a special attitude. Just make it happen and go for it and figure it out later, it seems like. Is there anything that stands out that if you wish you go back in time for college students and such, what they study, what would you go back and study to fill a void that you had along the way that said, gosh, if I only studied this, I would have been a little bit better at my job or wherever your entrepreneurship is?
Spend more time talking to customers than investors. Very simple. And that is proven true in every single entrepreneur that I've ever coached. In fact, I've got one that's just closing a deal this week. She was initially looking for 350 to 400,000 when I first started working with her 18 months ago, and she's closing this week $2.7 million. And the valuation went up. And she called me so many times, just like, oh my gosh, this investor is driving me insane. They're asking this and they're asking that. And they said they were going to close and blah, 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 blah. I'm like, take a deep breath and go close another customer. And like, just close customers because ultimately they have more power than the investors do. Because the investors are betting that at some point customers are going to write bigger checks than the investors. So why not go directly to the source?
You talked specifically about classes and what skills you should learn. For me in my operations career, I was really heavily focused on marketing and human resources and not so much accounting and finance. It was one of those classes in college that I very much so strategically aligned myself in groups of people to help me pass. And so I thought I was safe when I graduated, but I wasn't. Finance and accounting is something that you take with you in any role that you have. It helps shape your decision making in whatever you do. So I mean, I still haven't learned it, but I would like to.
Right here in the front.
Yes, I'm a fellow risk taker. So I've taken my fair share of dives and reinvented my life for the last 35 years when I went independent. And they say that when you reinvent yourself is the first day of a new dream. And that is all true. But again and again and again, and by the way, I'm a fellow teacher as well, and I've taught some courses here at USD, and my preferred subject is exit strategies. And one thing that I have seen in the last 35 years of being re-engineering and investment banker and what have you, is that I can't remember any company of any size, startup, mid-range, growth or whatever, that they pay any attention whatsoever how to conform the company on an exit strategy. So they come to a term when the market is, or the opportunity is there, but the company is not structured to face the opportunity. Either they don't know if they can sell profitability and multiples, or they can sell market share or customer base or technology, or they have not kept up with the innovation and renovation of technology, and their shelf life has ceased so many times that they have not been able to catch up. So my question is, has any one of you taken exit strategy as a mission critical situation to resolve when you start?
Yes, the answer is yes. In fact, I have a class that I teach with Dave Burkus. Dave is the chairman emeritus of Tech Coast Angels. He's also the chairman emeritus of the Angel Capital Association. And he's 73 years old, and he's done 161 angel investments over the last years. And his internal rate of return annually has been 101%. He and I have given this class together over the last several months, and it's called Reverse Engineering an Exit Event. And that's exactly how I was able to get most of those strategic acquisitions, is because you start with the end in mind. But don't confuse that with the idea of building a company for the purpose of flipping it. Those are two very different things. You build a company so that it has the ability to sustain as an independent business, but you create optionality for yourself in exit scenario planning. So you and I will have to talk after.
Well, I've had now 4 times, and I think that they've approached our company to be acquired. And I think each time I do more research, I understand more how it works. Before, I don't know, in my head, internet companies were not supposed to make any money. That was basically what they told me. You're not supposed to make any money. So have a bunch of users and, raise a bunch of capital. Then, first buyer that comes in, due diligence, and like, okay, well, that's not going to work. Here's your valuation. The first company, I think it was Entrepreneurship, and they basically, they're accustomed to buying TV stations, radio stations. They actually do make money. They didn't know what internet was, so it was they wanted to get into it. Didn't work out. Then the second time, it was very interesting because it was my fault. I was offered to acquire one of our websites, smaller ones, and they were paying us a premium of what I now knew what it. And I go to my investors. And instead of telling them the reality, I went with them. Yes, it's worth 1,000 times more. It's going to make more. And it was a very good deal. And I let it pass. And just to let you know, they were offering us $2 million. It's a small website. I wanted 4, 5, 10 million, 20 million. And everybody's applauding me. You feel really good. But that's not the reality. That's not the reality. The thing is, I should have taken that $2 million. So I learned another lesson. When somebody wants to buy, sell. In Spanish, we say, cuando te compran, Vende. And so I didn't, now that I have it buried in my head. I mean, the third time I'm going to say that, have everything in order, because the skeleton in the closets come out in the exit strategy. They always come out. Well, you gave me 1,000 shares. You promised me 1,000,000 shares, and they all come out. And so have it ready, because those type of things can kill an exit strategy. Basically, those, and they do come out for one reason or another.
Right, I think we have time for one more question. So over here.
For those of you who spoke about e-commerce, what platforms do you use to sell? Like, do you use like Amazon, like FBA, or do you have like private websites that you normally like to drive traffic to? And then also, in regards to like building skills and learning, how much would you say annually you invest into your education now?
Can you repeat the question?
I'll go.
The initial part was for e-commerce, what kind of platform do you use? So for me, it was Shopify with Facebook and other paid media, as well as Amazon. There's pluses and minuses to both. And the second part of that was how much do you spend on your education and time?
Nowadays, used to
For me, it's not as much like specific outlay, but I also plan on activities and things I'm doing, and I look at them in the scope of what am I going to learn from this, and whether it's giving back as well. I think it's a two-way street. But I would definitely say it's in the thousands and up, because I'm very focused on skill acquisition and what do I need to know going forward.
Well, I'm going to start. I actually created Blockbuster Mexico, the website that I know now is a joke for a lot of people, Blockbuster. But I remember when they came to me, Blockbuster Mexico did not have a website to sell video games, movies. And I actually had a platform. So I've always created our own platforms. I don't believe in using somebody else's platform. Now, that was then. Then Amazon came to Mexico, killed all of us. Everybody was dead, you know. But Blockbuster was actually a very good client. They actually made money in Mexico. But then again, Amazon came in. Right now I sell movies and DVDs, and video games through Amazon, because they have a great affiliate program. Yeah, I get 10% of every video game or movie I sell. I mean, that's because they're opening up the market. And if you ask me right now to create a e-commerce, I would not do it. It's just, you know. And investing, well, I do believe in investing, but I see like the developers or programmers, I let them take all the online courses they can, everything they can. And the gamers, they can go and play all the Fortnite they want.
All right, I think we're out of time for questions. Thank you so much. If we can give a round of applause to our panelists. We're going to have time for a break now. So now is an opportunity to talk more to the panelists or to other people in the room. And then at 8 o'clock, the room will be transformed, this room and the next few rooms in the back, and it will be a speed networking event where you can talk to both these entrepreneurs and the other entrepreneurs who are in the theater. So thank you again for coming and participating.
So